At its peak, Rome was home to approximately 1 million people, and lagging only slightly behind its number of human residents was the total count of gods worshipped in the city. The Roman penchant for adopting new deities, combined with its ever-broadening cultural horizons, meant that before long there was a cult for nearly every purpose imaginable, to the extent that Rome's public calendar became so full of holidays and festivals that all but the most devout seem to have forgotten the actual purpose of many of these rituals, much less their ancient origins. But no matter how many gods became bound up in the public pantheon, there was one festival that even the most religiously lax Roman was sure to remember. The Saturnalia in late December was a time of revelry and gift-giving that Romans, some more so than others, looked forward to all year long. Originally, Saturnalia was primarily an agricultural festival honoring Saturn, who was associated with both agriculture and abundance, among other things. During this early era, the festival initially occurred after the final wheat crop of the year was sown, but as Rome drifted further from its agricultural base, the date for celebrating the beginning of Saturnalia was set to December 17th. Over the course of Roman civilization, the holiday would grow in significance, and days were added until it eventually lasted an entire week during the imperial period. This meant that Saturnalia concluded on December 23rd, with the festival of Sol Invictus, which marked the winter solstice, occurring 2 days later on December 25th. The darkest, shortest days of the year were thus the most merry for the ancient Romans. This should come as little surprise, since prior to modern agriculture, there simply was not a great deal of work to do during these bleak winter months, and festivals were needed to stave off monotony. While midwinter festivals are common worldwide, it was the Roman conception of agricultural cycles, and the implicit association with the patron god Saturn, that gave Saturnalia the unique characteristics that we remember today. For while Saturnalia featured public sacrifice, the closing of official business, as well as feasting and revelry, so did many other Roman holidays. Saturnalia earned its unique place due to the highly unusual custom of social inversion, and the seemingly subversive leveling of the hierarchies that dominated Roman society. For the Romans sought to recreate the mythical golden age of Saturn, a time of peace, love, and universal brotherhood. The first inhabitants of Italy were the Aborigines, whose king Saturn was so just that there were no slaves or private goods under his reign. Instead, all property was communal and undivided, as if everyone had inherited everything. Following his example, the Romans take pains to flatten all social distinctions at the Saturnalia, and slaves lie down next to their masters at feasts. And so Italy was named Saturnia after the king, and the mountain where he lived was called Saturnius. Nowadays, it's called the Capitol, as if Jupiter pushed Saturn out. This idea of a world before conflict, of a lost paradise, is best paralleled by the cultural images we share today of the Garden of Eden. Whether we believe in their literal truth or not, they do speak to a longing we all share at some level, and the cultural pull of Saturn's golden age would have resonated in the Roman mind in a similar way. Whether as a conscious desire or merely ambient mental background noise, the influence of this idea was strong, and in my opinion, it reveals much about the Roman psyche. Roman religion stressed the continuity of nature, time, and the universe, and each ritual was, at its core, about recreating the sacred, in the hopes of bringing divine order into the chaotic mortal world. Saturnalia then, at a deeper level, was more than just a time to let loose and unwind. It was an intentional modeling of the ideal world, done in reverence and the hopes that this reality and bliss would one day break into our own material world. Because Romans, like the rest of us, never bothered to put into writing the rationale behind the aspects of their society that seemed most self-evident to them, the things that were beyond even questioning, the reverence of Saturn's golden age reveals much about the internal logic and the repressed longings of their society. that we would otherwise be unable to glimpse. So while the official component took place on December 17th, featuring a mass animal sacrifice performed by senators at the Temple of Saturn, followed by a grand banquet open to all, the festival is best remembered for its unofficial celebrations, with continuous parties and feasts lasting an entire week. Because moral constraints were briefly suspended, public gambling was permitted. However, participants were supposed to wager with nuts instead of coins, as during the age of Saturn, no money existed. Romans were attempting to recreate a lost world before class, state, and money were developed. Rousseau's idea of the state of nature was embodied in these celebrations, if only for a week, as the Romans sought to recreate the idyllic world of the deep past. Ovid's Metamorphoses features perhaps my favorite recollection of the Golden Age, and though the following selection is quite long, I believe it eloquently captures the ideal world that the Romans were striving to create, and as such provides remarkable insight into their hopes and dreams. First was the Golden Age, then rectitude spontaneous in the heart prevailed, and faith. Avengers were not seen, for laws unframed were all unknown and needless. Punishment and fear of penalties existed not. No harsh decrees were fixed on brazen plates. No supplicant multitude the countenance of justice feared, averting, for they dwelt without a judge in peace. The towns were not entrenched for time of war. They had no brazen trumpet, straight nor horns, of curving brass nor helmets, shields nor swords. Then, of her own accord, the earth produced a store of every fruit. The harrow touched her not, nor did the plowshare wound her fields. And man, content with given food, and none compelling, gathered arbute fruits and wild strawberries on the mountain sides, and ripe blackberries clinging to the bush, and corners and sweet acorns on the ground, down fallen from the spreading tree of Jove, eternal spring. When Saturn had been banished into night, and all the world was ruled by Jove supreme, the Silver Age, though not so good as gold, but still surpassing yellow brass, prevailed. The passages quoted above all provide a window into how Romans perceived the Golden Age, notably that even Jupiter, who they placed at the top of their pantheon, was seemingly incapable or unwilling to achieve the same universal prosperity as Saturn. Hence why Saturnalia and the revelry that accompanied its observation were so popular across all segments of society, because of its date in midwinter and a number of customs such as gift-giving, lighting candles, decorating with holly, and public singing that have been preserved in Christmas celebrations. Saturnalia is commonly referred to as Roman Christmas. Because it was the most significant Roman holiday, I believe there is some truth to this, but in looking at superficial similarities, a larger truth is obscured. The core of Saturnalia was actually a celebration of Roman liberty, of freedom from constraints that governed every aspect of life for the other 51 weeks of the year, be they moral, familial, or political. Hence, why throughout the week, everyone donned the pileus cap worn by freed slaves to denote their status. Because this celebration of freedom and equality was at the root of Saturnalia, I believe that a better modern analog is the 4th of July, or other holidays of national independence and liberation worldwide instead of Christmas. Elements of the two are certainly combined in the Saturnalia, but when we consider what is actually being celebrated, it is the liberty of Rome and its people that the celebrants were honoring. If you're enjoying this video, please do us a favor by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're a small channel, and this is the only way to get the almighty YouTube algorithm to notice us. Furthermore, you can help Tribunate become more sustainable by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Thank you for all of your support. Another reason why the comparison to the 4th of July is apt is that in addition to revealing the aspirations of Roman society, Saturnalia also highlights the deficiencies of Rome and the limits of its official ideology. For while much has been made of the practice of social leveling during Saturnalia, with stories of masters and slaves changing places and a degree of liberty being granted to the enslaved for a week, these practices do little more than illustrate the barbarity of Roman slavery and the profound toll of suffering required for Rome to maintain its privileged position at the center of a vast empire. To believe that a master who lets his slaves have 1 week off a year is somehow acting generously is to disregard the profound injustice of his actions during the remainder of the year. Men who had no right to hold others in bondage were not benevolent for allowing a brief reprieve from servitude, humiliation, and exploitation. Rather, this recognition of the humanity of their slaves, of their desires for freedom and leisure, makes them more culpable, in my view, than if they were completely ignorant of the humanity of those they enslaved. To fall for the lie of the kindly master is to believe the propaganda of Roman slave owners, whose wealth, power, and comfort relied on the immiseration of countless others. Furthermore, while slaves in the household would have been granted some privileges during Saturnalia, one has to doubt that these same limited freedoms would have been granted to all slaves. The bulk of the enslaved labored on country estates, in mines, or other contexts where they had no contact with their owners. The only thing that the Roman aristocrat knew of them was the balance sheet he received from overseers detailing his total inventory of slaves as well as their production output. Without any contact with their masters, their humanity was denied further, and they are referred to in records as simply speaking tools, bare implements of production that differed from cattle only in the risk that they might attempt to run away. Are we to believe that the exploitation of these poor souls ceased across the empire for an entire week? Roman aristocrats may have revered Saturn, but they cherished gold in the here and now more than they desired a golden age. The hypocrisy and shamelessness is echoed by slave owners in all contexts in which the barbaric institution was practiced, and is expertly critiqued by the former slave and abolitionist leader, Frederick Douglass. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. It is hard not to view Saturnalia in the same light, not as a holiday which truly proclaimed the equality of all, but rather as a reification of the status quo. For 1 week, the slave was confronted with a vision of what could be, of the privileges, joys, and happiness he was denied on a daily basis. While this week off was certainly appreciated, it is a stark reminder of his secondary status, and, even more hauntingly, that the order of the cosmos which had brought him to this fate was a precarious thing. His bondage was not inevitable. It was not the insurmountable forces of fate which affixed the chains, but mere contingency and the decisions of mortal men. None were slaves by nature. All held in bondage were instead reduced to property by those that were inherently no different from themselves. Saturnalia intended to show that another world was possible, that the Golden Age could be recovered. In many respects it failed, but by illustrating plainly the shortcomings of Rome, it can help guide our own introspection regarding the ideals we claim to hold dear and whether these are realized in practice. Call it Saturn's golden age, the Garden of Eden, or the state of nature. We all desire something beyond what exists, and working to make this dream real requires more than just the Roman practice of acknowledging problems. The knowledge and insight we gain from our studies should not just be limited to interpreting the world and its problems. The point is to change it.